and I got into a car for a drive that we'd done many a times before. It was a 5-minute drive, and we got all but 200 metres from home, from the driveway, and the driver, he fell asleep, rolled the car. I was in the back seat and broke my neck. That was the end of any aspirations to play rugby league professionally. And I did not want to identify as someone with a disability. That's what I fought hard against. So coming back to coaching, it gave me a little bit more of an identity, and it gave me some purpose. Yeah, the number one takeaway was it's all about relationships and how you treat people and what you bring to that. When you look at leadership, you try and sum it up. For me, it's the interactions that happen between people. It's not what is actually
What does it
done
take to turn a life-changing
there's going to be times in life where things are going to get tough and you're going to be a little bit...
In this episode of Cultural Leadership, we learn about the extraordinary journey of Cameron Carr,
resilience can only take
founder
so far,
of Perception
and
Performance
sometimes we
and
use
a
that
world
word
and
a little too
Paralympic
much.
champion.
And if you're not adaptable...
From a promising rugby league career to becoming a pioneer in leadership and inclusivity, Cameron's story is one of resilience, purpose, and the power of authentic relationships. Discover how coaching kids reignited his passion, how wheelchair rugby transformed his perspective, and why he's committed to reshaping leadership for diverse teams. So get ready to be inspired by this remarkable journey of determination and impact. Cameron, thanks for coming on to the Cultural Leadership Podcast, mate. It's great to have you finally.
Yes, thank you. It's been quite a wait, but I'm excited to be here.
It has, mate. Mainly my fault. We had a bit of stuff happening, and anyway, it's great to have you on board. Great to meet you finally. We had a conversation sort of many months ago, and great to have you put forward by a mutual friend of ours, Michael Crutcher, who runs the Source podcast. A good fellow in itself. He did a shout out to me on his podcast recently, so I thought it was just appropriate that I do a shout out on him as well.
Well done. I'm sure he'll appreciate that.
If he bloody listens,
we'll find out whether he does.
I'm pretty sure he's going to listen to this episode or watch this episode with you, mate. I said he put you forward, and a lot of praise for you, mate. So, mate, look, I know that we're going to get into sort of the accident and this sort of massive change in your life. But what I'd love to do first is you come from a pretty well-established rugby league family. Your father was, I think, in the first Queensland State of Origin team back in the 80s, and also your uncle played first grade. So, what sort of expectations did that bring on you, either within your family or even outside of the family from the general public in your own journey?
Yeah, look, probably reflecting the expectations from within the family, I'd never felt any. I was never pushed to go down the same path. It was probably the expectations that I had on myself and how I wanted to what I wanted to do and how I was going to get there, but definitely you could feel the comparison all the time as a kid growing up, and probably as I moved along my journey and got to that 17, 18 sort of age bracket, you could definitely feel the comparison a little bit more. If you're listening to some of the you're watching some of the videos, doing a review, quite often you would hear the comparison by a spectator that might be close to the recording.
It's interesting. You see it so often in, I guess, when kids are making their own journey and parents are sort of had some sort of career in that sort of sport beforehand. And again, it's often, I guess, like you said, not a lot of expectation or not a lot of pressure from within the family, but there's certainly this expectation outside of the family. What about on yourself? What sort of expectations, having known this, you're old enough, I think you'd sort of watched your father in a grand final and win for Souths, I think it was. So did you have any sort of high expectations of yourself, given that, again, your father and uncle were fairly high achieving in their chosen sport?
I'm sure there was. It's a long time ago now, Brendan. But look, I just love the sport. For me, there may have been an expectation, and there may have been certain goals or achievements that I wanted to get to, but also I had a bit of a plan, on how I wanted to do that. And when I look back, I didn't see a lot of Dad's career. He retired by the time I was 9. And the stuff that I've seen, we were probably very different. We had very different physical characteristics. I think Dad may have been 5'10" or something, played at a fairly light playing weight, probably in 80 kilos, which was probably standard back in the 70s and 80s. Whereas I was a little bigger, I think I was 6'3", and a little heavier. So whilst there was some similarities that may have led to some expectations, sort of just concentrated on myself, and created my own sort of manageable, I suppose, expectations.
Yeah, good to do at a young age, mate. You said you love the sport. So what did you love about rugby league, or just sort of that sport in general?
Yeah, and probably some of the stuff that still continues today. I just like being around a team environment and what that can bring when it's operating well. When you have set a high performing environment, the joy that you get out of achieving things. That was one of the big things. But I also just love the physical contest. Whether it was a team or as an individual, it's like, okay, I'm going to try and be challenged to get one over you.
So basically, you just love smashing into people. Is that what you're saying?
We try and do it in a more refined manner, Brandon.
Yes, I'm sure you do, mate.
Yeah.
It's coming from someone who's never played rugby league. I played some union, but never played rugby league. It's sort of, geez, they hit hard, I'll tell you what.
Well, it's the art of avoiding those hits, right?
It's a fair point, mate. It's a skill in itself, I bet.
Yeah.
Let's go on to the accident, mate. Let's sort of set this thing. Give us a bit of background, sort of the journey you were on, this fateful night that happened, which changed the trajectory of your life considerably. Tell us a bit more, mate.
Yeah, so I just signed a contract with the Sydney Roosters and was planning to go down there and move to Sydney. The morning of, I had my bags packed and I was driving down to Sydney with a friend of mine. I got a phone call from the Roosters just to say, hey, the accommodation that we had planned for you, things have changed. How about instead of driving down now, we fly you down in 2 weeks' time? And I thought that was fantastic. It was like, okay, I don't have to do that drive. It's before the times of mobile phones, so it would have meant trying to get hold of my friend wherever he was. But the Roosters must have done that prior, because he didn't show up to my house. So I went, great, I'm going to fly down in 2 weeks' time. So I was living out of my suitcase, for the next week. I did a talk on International Day with people with a disability, and we talked about my accident and compared it to the movie Sliding Doors. And I said I hadn't seen the movie, but I just quickly searched up what the meaning was, just to go, okay, this has popped up.
You did the TikTok check.
I did, and it shows it was seemingly inconsequential moments that have an impact on future decisions or the trajectory of your path. And I look at that one moment being quite pivotal. Saying no, I'll come down. So that happened, and then a week later, I was at a friend's 21st birthday party, and it was a pretty small event, just with some close family and friends, and it was wrapping up around midnight, I guess, and we decided, a bunch of mates and I decided to go into the city for a couple more ales, and a friend of mine got into a maxi taxi, and we were sitting in the front, and no one had showed up. So I said, I'll go in and hurry them along because the meter's running. So I went in, and they were coming out. A bunch of them were coming out, and they all decided, for whatever reason, all of them decided they would go home to their separate beds. And I thought, that's a good idea. I still have no idea why I chose that path. that decision. And went, that's a good idea. I'll go home and call it a night and get a good night's sleep. So I went back to the taxi. Said, "Oh, mate, enjoy your night, and I'll see you tomorrow for a game of touch football." And I got into a car for a drive that we'd done many a times before. It was a 5-minute drive, and we got all but 200 meters from home, from the driveway. And the driver, he fell asleep, rolled the car, and I was in the back seat and broke my neck. So that was the end of any aspirations to play rugby league professionally.
And mate, you made the reference of Sliding Doors movie. I mean, I'm sure you're not doing it now. You've built a life, and we'll go into some of this and what you're doing, but an inspirational journey. How many times and how long were you playing that story through your head, and like the what if scenario? You know, it sounded like your decision to be a responsible 21-year-old, which I certainly wasn't at that age, and to go home. That was a pivotal moment.
It was. I was 19, so I was even more responsible as a 19-year-old.
Oh, shivers, yeah.
Yeah, so like I said, I don't know the reason why.
But time for responsibility.
The what ifs lasted a long time. I spent 6 months in hospital rehabbing, and that's all about getting out. That's okay. Here's your new best mate, which has got 4 wheels. Get used to it. You don't get a handbook. Okay, now your life's changed. Quite dramatically. This is how you approach it. So I spent 6 months in hospital just rehabbing and getting out. It wasn't hospital's not a great environment anyway, but when you're in there long term for 6 months, it just, and I had no involvement with hospitals, prior to then as a 19-year-old. So no understanding really about hospitals or the environment, and definitely no understanding about someone living with a disability, and then when I got home, that's when reality really hit hard. I spent probably the next 6 years just asking that question, what if, why did it happen to me? And how do I get that old life back? Because I was quite comfortable with what was happening. 6 years of a pretty dark place, just continually just trying to understand why this had happened to me.
Yeah, mate. Look, I can't even sort of comprehend or try and imagine that myself. But many, many years ago, a short story, I did some work in a place called the Helwan Centre, which was in Brisbane. So I can't remember, it might have been in the Gap or something. So it was a school and a place for profoundly handicapped children. And I met her and spent time with a young boy there. And he was, up until the age of 10, was able-bodied, and unfortunately was at his grandparents' place and somehow got into their medicine cabinet and became profoundly handicapped. And that just like even to this day, that sort of cuts me up big time. And I'm just an outsider, not even part of that family. I mean, the impact on you and the impact on your family, like this whole life-changing thing, like how do you, like, just give us some insight into your mindset over that sort of time to start to comprehend this. I know you say it was a 6-year journey, it was a long one, but can you just give us some insight into that mindset needed to make that move in some sort of positive direction?
Someone asked me that question the other day, actually, and I went, hopefully you're not looking for some further insight. Because look, I hid away. That was my coping mechanism. I just decided, you know what, I can go and I can sleep, and I can sleep long hours. And when I'm sleeping, I'm free. I'm not in the wheelchair. I'm just So, and I still had quite a competitive mindset. So I would compete with myself, and those competitions probably weren't healthy, Brendan. But it was, how long can I stay inside for? How long can I stay inside my house for? How long can I stay inside my room for? Just withdrawing from society, because I'm not there yet in terms of being vulnerable or exposing myself society. But in terms of that shift, I think I must have been around 25. I'd moved out of home. It's probably drinking a little bit too much, not doing the right things. And I just woke up one morning and went, wow, all this sort of negotiation and bargaining that I think I'm doing with a higher power, it's not working, and I need to make some changes now. And the best way that I thought to make those changes was to go back to a space where I felt comfortable in it, and that was in a sort of sporting environment. So I just went, I'm 25. I need to get fit and I need to get active. So that was the shift that I had, or that I made.
You're a professional, mate. You've sort of lent me into the next question for me, but you've explained, or in your story that you share with me, you talked about the sort of accident as seeing it as life ending, and then needing to move to this life changing sort of mindset. How did the opportunity, or maybe the forced opportunity on you to start to coach your brother's rugby team, how did that help start to move you from that life ending to life changing mindset?
I'm laughing now because I'm thinking of the conversation. So they actually wanted to get Dad involved in coaching him, and Dad actually coached me for a couple of junior years. And I'm sure anyone out there that's listening that has as a parent coached them in a sport, it can be a rocky path. It can test relationships, and it can test the especially between parents, right? When you're going home going, Dad did this and this to me at training, why is he being a turd? So I don't know whether Dad wanted to go down that same.
Was taken up your side, not 100%, your dad's side.
Yeah. So because
good on your mum.
Because I was faster to get out of the car.
Oh, classic.
Especially if I had to open the gate or something like that. It's like,
yeah.
Watch how fast I get to Mum, and that story has just been told.
Tell your side of the story first.
There's no opportunity for you to do so. So look, Dad was probably reluctant to go, oh, look, it can go pear-shaped. I don't want that. I probably don't want to have that. He probably didn't want to have that extra headache. So, and he probably thought it was a great opportunity to try and force me to get out of the house, because I know Mum and Dad tried to do that originally with some sport. When you're going through hospital, they introduce you a whole range of different sporting activities to try and get you, as part of your rehab, and I just denied them all. So I remember there was times they sort of forced me in the car, drove me to the stadium, and I just refused to get out of the car. I was quite stubborn, and that happened throughout a lot of family, friends, throughout those 6 years. But yeah, I think Dad went, I'll ask him to see if he's interested in getting involved. So I said yes. I coaxed my cousin and a good friend to come along on the journey with me. But it was probably 3 years, and they were 12 to 15, I think, the age groups. I coached 3 years in a row. And children are brutally honest, It's they're authentic, which is probably some of the hard realities and truths that I needed at the time.
I guess relating to that, you brought a new definition to armchair critic. You were the Carr coach critic or something like that, weren't you? Tell us more about that scenario and where the feedback came from that child.
Yeah, and that's got nothing to do with our surname and me being a critic of Dad's ability to coach.
No.
It's the actual.
You're double R.
Yeah,
you're double R.
Yeah, it's just the automobile. So that was part of the mindset where I was at. Was okay, I can. I've seen coaches sort of sit up in coaching boxes with walkie-talkies and headsets and so forth. There's no reason why I can't do it from my car. So I'll coach this team from the car. Problem is most football grounds are within a fenced area, right? So the vision of the ground wasn't great. So that
You didn't have your film crew.
that transformational idea of coaching quickly got squashed. But I suppose that was the stepping stones for me to go, okay, I can rationalise it. What does it look like? This is what I'll do. It didn't work, so yeah, I just was forced to go the normal coaching path and get out of my car.
And I mean, I am honing in on this a little bit because at least from the story I'm aware of and what you shared with me, that this scenario was a pivotal moment, isn't it, in sort of taking on that journey? And do you remember looking back sort of when you started to enjoy this process and actually feel like it, even though you'd had this life-changing situation, and this was 6 years later, but you're starting to feel like, okay, I'm contributing back to society, let's say. I'm contributing to these kids and them enjoying the game and loving the game that I love as well.
The pivotal word that you used was contributing, and I think everyone wants to feel like they're contributing to society. So that was a big aspect of it, and that was one of the big drivers. And the two other things is it gave me a sense of identity, which I had lost. You know, I went from growing up being Norm's son to try and break that shadow, to then sort of start getting out of that and identified, you know, what am I? I'm a rugby league player. That was all taken away, and I did not want to identify as someone with a disability. You know, that's what I fought hard against. So coming back to coaching, you know, it gave me a little bit more of an identity, and it gave me some purpose, you know, which was the other big thing. You know, I had something to do and something to look forward to 3 times a week.
And what was it about coaching kids that gave you that sense of purpose, sense of identity? Like, what did you love about that?
It wasn't the reimbursement from being an under 12 coach.
I've coached young football, soccer people, and yes, I understand.
Yeah. It put me in that team environment again. Yeah, they were 12 and 13, you know. But what it did was we were working towards something together. It was bringing those kids in. Okay, what do we want to do? How do we want to do it? And really working with them, and you know, building their confidence and their skill set, and you know, trying to change their understanding of what their role was in the team. You know, we had some young kids that would just go, I'm a front rower. I don't pass, kick, or do anything like that. It was like, okay, but let's try and work on those things, because you may be a front rower now, but your role may change. And yeah, let's you know, working on things with kids. You know, that was probably the most enjoyable part.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm no rugby league expert, but you can certainly see how the game's changed over the decades, right? And those front rowers, mate, they're as good as the halves nowadays, as far as passing and kicking and all that sort of stuff. Not all of them, but they're pretty decent.
They're pretty decent, you know, and they're a lot bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. Pre-accident, post-accident, did people treat you differently?
Yeah, they do. They did, because now I was part of a minority group that has strong societal stereotypes. You know, the bias and discrimination. It was like, wow, this is really happening. You know, 6 months ago, those questions wouldn't have been asked of me, or you know, that opinion wouldn't have been made. And now, all these things are. Yeah. So,
can you give us an example of something like that?
One of the big things is people not talking to you. Other than all the discrimination, bias, the assumptions that are made around people with disability, and that's an education and awareness piece that's still going on. It's having a conversation with someone, and it still happens now with my wife. Sometimes if the kids have beaten me down and I'm a bit tired, we'll just let it pass. But other times, you just go, they've beat me down too much. The kids, I need to interject here, and I can be quite sort of blunt. You go, you know what, I can answer that question because it's involving me, and I have the answer for it. So, that's a big one that continues. And I can't think of this particular or specific time when it happened, but it happened a lot, and it was one of the first things that I did notice post accident.
What about the kids you coach? Did they treat you different?
For a bit, probably for the first one or two, and I'm not talking about everyone. Kids are great. Like I said, they just get on with things. They're adaptable. They're resilient. They're all those things that you want in a workforce when they get older. But I do remember the first conversation that one of the kids came down and was like, "Oh, who are you?" Like, "Oh, hi, I'm Cameron. I'm the new coach." And he's like, "Nah, you can't coach. You're in a wheelchair." Like, okay, fair point. But let's see how we go. And you just got to laugh at those things. You really do, because they mean nothing by it, and they're part of the system, and we don't know how they, conversations and interactions that they've had that have led them to that remark. But I do remember one time when my cousin and my mate, who were the assistant coaches, weren't there, and we're at training, and I was like, "Oh, okay, guys, let's go for a jog." And sometimes you get that old school coaching mentality. It was like, "Hey, well, you've dropped the ball. Let's do some push-ups or something." And I remember one of the response, same kid, looked up to me and went, "Well, you're going to make me? Because your minders aren't here now." It was like,
there's always one little smartass, isn't there?
Yeah. Like, you do what you want to do. No, I'm not going to make you. Don't drop the ball, go.
Did you win him over eventually, or you just
He was one of those kids, right? That was a bit rough around the edges, but yeah, probably had a heart of gold, and just had this personality that you're sort of probably drawn to. Could be in jail now. I don't know.
Oh, maybe. I mean, like you said earlier, it is the beauty of kids, isn't it? They pretty much tell it how it is, and it's pretty unfiltered. That can be really positive, and that can come from another place. But there's not necessarily they're not old enough to have that really bad intent behind what they're saying a lot of the time.
Oh, totally. And I remember in rehab not long after my accident, and I was going to a pool to do some swimming, and they put you in at the time they put you in a PVC pipe sort of chair to go in the pool, right? And this 5-year-old came up to me, and I just had a really cranky day. And this 5-year-old came up, "Well, you can't bring that thing in the pool. And what happened to you?" And I was like, looked at him and went, "I ate too many lollies, buddy." And his face just dropped. And he left me alone from then on in.
Oh, mate, that's I love that. Absolutely.
Right.
Let's hope they've reduced their lolly intake then off the back of that.
Yeah.
You've served the community well, mate.
I have. The parents should have thanked me.
I mean, in all seriousness, really those kids, like to some extent, you need to thank them. I mean, yes, your dad, and maybe he had this sort of ulterior master stroke thinking, which is probably the case, a smart guy. But, those kids have really helped you get to where you are today in this ongoing journey where you're going to, and so much more to give.
Yeah.
You're still a young fella like me. We got heaps to give, mate.
Got my own kids now, so it's 24/7 getting worn down by those kids as opposed to 3 times a week. But yeah, look, I do need to reflect on those kids and that part of the journey, which was quite pivotal. I don't know whether Dad had any grander plan other than just to get me out of his hair for 3 days a week. And, probably his grand plan was probably, I I'll get him out of my hair and then he'll move out and I'll get my house back.
Well, either way, like parents should, they can take credit for these things, whether it was a masterstroke or not, or just luck. Something worked out all right. Mate, what took you? Let's sort of keep moving forward. What took you, or how did the whole wheelchair rugby come about?
Yeah, like I touched on earlier, when you go into the spinal unit, you're introduced to a lot of different things as part of your rehab journey. Wheelchair rugby was one of those. It was probably the closest to rugby league in terms of, the environment. And it just seemed like a natural thing to do. It was actually designed back in the 70s for individuals that sort of broke their neck at the level that I had. So yeah, it was the one that was shining the brightest. But it still took a while to get down there.
Before I sort of ask why around that, what sort of other options did you consider, if any?
I didn't really. Like when I was sitting on the lounge, when I need to change something, I need to get fit and I need to start being active. I started hand cycling. I remember the physio that I had in hospital that introduced me to a number of different things. Hand cycling was one of those, and it's something that I can do, and I still do it now. As an escape, a little bit of mindfulness is just to get on the hand cycle and sort of to go. It's quite freeing, and you can have time to reflect and some space to think up some brand new schemes. But hand cycling was the original, and then the physio did say, "Oh look, he's still interested in wheelchair rugby because they have a great new program now in Queensland. We've got a coach out from the US." I think it came off the back of a couple of years after the Sydney Paralympic Games where they had got a silver medal. But all just sort of aligned, and yeah, he talked me into going down and having a look.
And why did it take you so long?
It's probably, we talked about stereotypes. And for me, like I said, I didn't identify as someone with a disability. Yeah, I was using a wheelchair, but I didn't want to be part of that group. And I had all the same stereotypes and bias and discrimination against people with disability. It's like, well, I don't want to play a sport. I love playing rugby league, and that's the sport that I want to play. I don't even want to entertain doing something different because it's not going to give me the same level of enjoyment or excitement.
And I'm interested to understand what put you in your place, so to speak. Like, was it another person with a disability going through a similar thing, or was it something else?
Look, one thing that it did do, it provided that peer support that I didn't have. So I went home from hospital and I tried to just continue to live the same life that I had prior to my accident. So, and we were all learning. So I had no idea about being in a wheelchair. My family had no idea. My friends had no idea. So there was no level of support there to go, okay, this is what you need to do and this is how you do it and this is what's achievable. So that was one of the things. But the first thing was, as soon as I went into that court, or that basketball court, and there was a game going on when I arrived at training that night, and there was just a lot of banging, swearing. It was just frustration. People wanting to tear each other's heads off, and I was like, wow, this is a totally different picture to what I'd been playing out in my head. I thought they might have been, just sitting around having cups of tea, knitting, not wanting to get hurt. But it's like, no, you put them in a chair and in an environment, a competitive environment, people with this disability are just like everyone else. We want to win, and we'll do it any way that we can.
You sound like a masochist, mate. You couldn't get signed up quick enough.
All that's going to be edited, right? And I'll take that out because it didn't sound great.
No, it sounded fantastic.
Yeah,
I mean, I used to get my chosen sport was football, soccer, but always get a bit of frustration out on the weekend. Nothing wrong with that, mate. So whatever sport you choose to do. Yeah,
and you could just imagine the frustration a lot of these people had. It's like, okay, I'm going to take it out, and there will be people. Some people turn up out of hospital, as part of the rehab program, so they're just newly injured. And it didn't matter if they decided to get in the wheelchair. There were some crazy guys that were like, well, you're now playing. I'm going to try and knock you out of that chair. Mum's on the sideline freaking out because her son's just broken neck, going, wrap him in cotton wool, don't touch him. And you got other guys going, okay, it's fair game.
Absolutely. I mean, and again, I have seen some of this wheelchair rugby. Like it seems like a vicious game. There must be some serious injuries come from these sort of clashing and banging and all sorts of stuff.
Yes, there can be. You're spending a lot of money. I think it's now for a chair, it's probably upwards of $15,000. Wow. And if you're competing at an international level, you might get 18 months or 2 years, depending on your role, out of that chair. So, the chair's taking most of the hits and the way they're designed. But yeah, look, things can go a little bit wrong. For me, I was pretty lucky. You had some wear and tear of your shoulders, but the only injury that I had, it was probably 8 weeks prior to the Rio Paralympic Games, and I was playing a game, and I thought my friend was supposed to block the other. It was a Japanese player. I was supposed to block him, but he hit him with such force that it drove him into me and jumped up on my chair, and it hit my hand, and I went, oh, that, and we're wearing gloves, and I went, oh, that stung a little. But the game went on for another 30 seconds, and I sort of pushed down the end of the court and went, oh, this is still stinging. While I've got time, I'm just going to take my glove off. And I took my glove off, and I had actually did a compound dislocation of my ring finger, so my bone was sticking through my finger. So, positive was I had 8 weeks to Rio, so I actually took the cast off in our final training session over in Rio de Janeiro. So yeah, that was probably the worst injury that I've sustained. But yeah,
Wow, mate. Again, like any sport, there's always going to be injuries, but that sounds like the sort of one, if you took the glove off and I was there, it's probably pass-out moment for me, mate. I'm not sure I can handle that sort of stuff.
It took a little while. I went to the first aid lady, and she was sort of, just sitting there. She was an old lady just sitting there eating a muffin, not really paying attention. And I've gone up and I said,
that was the tea and biscuits you talked about earlier, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's just like, oh, maybe I'll have to give someone an ice pack, or don't call on me. And I went up to her and said, oh, look, I've got this here. And she looked at it, and the knuckles sticking out, and there wasn't that much blood. And she's like, oh, what is it? Is that a pimple? And I was like, no, it's not a pimple. It's a bone. She's like, no, it's not. And she's like, when did you do this? And I was like, I did it yesterday. But you told me to go home and sleep on it to see if it would heal. And now I've returned, and she's like, what? Yeah. And I went, no, I'm joking. I just did it then. Did you not hear all that banging kerfuffle? That's my bone. I think we need to do more than get an ice pack or a Band-Aid. So, yeah.
There's no doubt about you, mate. You've got a sense of humour through all of this sort of stuff, pre and post, I suppose. But it sounds like a bit of IT support, right? Level 1, they sort of tap out here, and you need to go to level 2, level 3 to get the help you needed.
Yeah, that's right. That's what happened.
Again, linking this back to sort of leadership qualities, and there's no doubt about in the level that you were in, the path you were on, and sort of what you've done post, you've had leadership qualities right the way through. But what sort of qualities do you think you develop further in your whole sort of representing Australia in the wheelchair and being co-captain of, again, you won gold, won silver, and also won a world championship, I think. So
yeah,
what did you develop?
I think all along, it was really important about role modelling, and When I left school, I actually I signed a contract with the South Queensland Crushers, the now defunct Australian Rugby League team. So there was a bunch of us that go, and I wasn't doing the right things at the time, and I was asked to go down to the Logan City Scorpions with a couple of friends to work on some things. And I remember Dad saying to me, and this is probably one of the only bits of advice that he really passed on, he's like, okay, you're going down there, make sure that you keep the same level of expectation that you have on yourself, and make sure you're doing all the right things and bring everyone up to your standard. Don't lower your standard. So for me, it always is about role modeling, and leading from the front. But wheelchair rugby, when I was made, when you're put into that role, and some of the learnings that I've had after it, because all leaders have their hiccups, right? And had some time to reflect, okay, what would I do differently? And for me, it's just understanding, you've set some rules, some expectations, you've got a purpose that everyone is working towards, but you also have a team of individuals. They're going to respond all in individual ways. You can't lead the same way with everyone and expect the same results.
Was there any, I guess, a most challenging time you had that you could share in co-captaining the Australian wheelchair rugby team? Either that was with another teammate or maybe another member of an opposition team or even some officials, that sort of you really had to think twice about.
I don't think your podcast is long enough to go down to the officials.
Brendan, yes. We love officials, mate.
Just for my son. My son's 12 and we've made him referee now. He plays the Aussie rules and we've made him referee to get an appreciation of what referees go through.
Funny how we never did that though.
No way. He actually gets paid now. Whereas I think you may have got like a can of Coke and a pack of chips or something when we were younger.
If that, yeah.
Look, there's lots of things, but one particular story that I can think of, top of my head, and it had to do with working through a pretty traumatic time for one of our players. So we were in London. One of the young guys that was over there, and I was pretty close to him. I went into his room. And it's probably a week before the games were about to start, and I went into his room, and he just looked down, and something was off, and I was like, what's going on? And he said, "Oh, did you hear about the guys over in I think it was in Afghanistan at the time? There was an insurgent come in and kill a couple of soldiers." I was like, "No, I didn't. When did that happen?" And he's like, "Oh, it happened, overnight." One of those guys was a close schoolmate. So it was just creating the space and the environment to discuss with him what's going to be best for him. How do we communicate this to the wider team, and how do we get the supports necessary? And do you still want to be here? He'd come over by himself. His parents didn't come over with him, so we were his, support network, over there. So it was just working through that space and to go, okay, well, if you're going to play on, we still need you to perform at a high level, and how do we do that and be mindful of what has just happened?
And how did that move forward? So what sort of support did that person need from you as a captain of the team?
Probably just to listen. And I think, as you get older, and you step into those leadership spaces, it's like you're not going to have all the answers. Sometimes they don't want an answer. It's creating a space for him to work that through himself and determine, okay, well, where do I want to go next? And then when that decision is made, then rallying around and going, okay, how are we as a team, as a wider group, going to get you there? And also keeping in mind the needs of the team and what we were there for.
Yeah, well said, mate. It leads to that sort of trust and team cohesion stuff. And it may seem a silly question, but I want you to unpack this anyway. That how important is it that with, on the field, off the field, those relationships, that level of trust and team cohesion in order to create success in an environment like that?
It's the number one, that relationship building, and that's whether it's in the sporting world or in a business environment. I think I shared with you offline that in between the time of you inviting me on the program to actually being on the program, I've now completed my master's in leadership, and my biggest takeaway from that master's is
can you just, sorry to interrupt, but just don't dig at me, all right? It's taken that long, you've actually completed a master's. Sorry,
I didn't want to bring that up. I
couldn't hold back.
Well done.
It's been a while.
It's been, yes. There'll be quality though, hopefully, Brendan.
It is. It's gold.
What? Yeah, the number one takeaway was it's all about relationships and how you treat people and what you bring to that. When you look at leadership, you try and sum it up. For me, it's the interactions that happen between people, and it's not what is actually done to people.
You've mentioned the whole master of leadership a couple of times. I know you're not digging, mate. It's all good. What confidence has that given you? Like, what has that actually given you, do you think, over and above sort of what you've been able to develop through real life experience?
Look, there's a lot of when you're going through it, you realise there's a lot of theory, a lot of literature, a lot of different thoughts around leadership. But like I said before, that observing it, being part of it, and now learning about it, I still come back to, if you want that team to perform, you need to have the relationships there. You can't unless you're a dictator, and that doesn't turn out that well. You can't lead people if you don't have followers. And everyone aspires to be like someone that they admire or want to be like. So yeah, you really need to build those strong foundational relationships.
Sorry, go on, mate.
No, I'm just thinking a little more. I think there's, like I said, there's a lot of theory, but I can't remember the study, but the three common traits of a high performing team were diversity, psychological safety, and a purpose worth fighting for. And that building of that psychologically safe space in order to build those relationships.
Do you find in your experience, both sporting and in the business world today, that people either understand the enormous value and importance of relationships, or do they undervalue it in your experience?
It's totally undervalued. Yep.
Tell us more. Why do you say that?
I think people just get too busy, right? And if the norms of the environment haven't been set, and you are following a leader that doesn't believe in relationships, just believes in this is, and quite often we get leadership and management confused, and can be quite task orientated. So I think we just need to be really mindful when we're put into a leadership position or we're put into an environment where it may not be where we need them to be, that we don't start shifting towards those norms, that we really focus on, hey, let's start really focusing on relationships rather than always being task orientated. Because at the end of the day, the easiest path forward is just to get the task done, to get the money in the bank.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I think it's severely undervalued, and I think that you'd actually said something to me before we started recording about what the models of leadership are and what we sort of see and classify as leadership, and it's a bit of that, isn't it? It's almost like when I have a couple of clients that think a little about this way, and you've got to sort of rein them in a bit. It's almost looking for the next fancy tool around leadership rather than saying, you know what, we've got some relationship issues in our team. Let's work through those, and then we can leverage that into having real conversations, because you guys will have the answers, but the relationships aren't strong enough in order to have the conversation you need to have to resolve those issues, rather than trying to put in a fancy tool.
Yeah, that's 100%. Those conversations, the really deep conversations that need to be had to drive performance, you can't have them because you haven't created that safe space in order to build the relationships that are necessary. I think
let's face it. Sorry, go on.
I think we hold on to, like you touched on, some of those characteristics or traits, and we all look towards. I know I definitely did when I was put into a leadership role early on. Is like, you need to be that hero leader. You need to be the loudest in the room. You need to be telling everyone what to do. This is the way we do it, and if you don't, you're off the ship. But we've evolved as a society now, and we probably expect and want more from our leaders, and that is a lot of it is that sense of belonging, connection.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also a big advocate of there's a time and a place for different styles of leadership, isn't it? That autocratic style can come in very handy, certainly in a crisis or needing to make swift change, but it doesn't work for everything. It's not. It's like, get the sledgehammer out for the same nail. That's not the way to go.
Yeah, totally. I work in for a mining company currently. So yeah, look, there is a time and place when it's a safety critical issue. Sort of outside of that, you need to sort of adapt and mold your leadership styles.
Yeah, absolutely. Mate, let's talk. I'd love to learn about I know early next year, you're going sort of back into your own thing and really starting to drive that in 2025.
Yeah.
Perception Performance. What inspired you to start this business called Perception Performance?
Well, look, I just think personally, I love driving either a high-performing individual to do, or an individual to do better, or that team. Let's work together. I love the connections that you make, the relationships, and the overall outcome, and the feeling you get of achieving an outcome that you've set out to do. So, and sitting back and observing both the sporting world and now in business world, and sometimes our leaders just, they don't know how to do that. They don't create the space to sit back and reflect and go, how do we do that? And I just thought it was just a natural progression for me to go, you know what? I now have a number of different perspectives on how we can get individuals and teams to where we need to. Yeah, why not have a crack?
Absolutely, mate. Have a crack. Who do you hope to help?
Anyone that needs help. Anyone.
There's a lot of people out there that need help. Yeah, not everyone is open to it.
Yeah, look, there's a couple of things. I go, and you're always evolving and changing, and it's business, it's sport, it's changing mindsets. It's sitting down with someone, whether it's an individual team, and just sitting down with them and having a conversation and really creating that space, and asking those challenging questions that people may not ask themselves. We can be quite fearful and we run scenarios through our heads and we have all these preconceived assumptions, and that stops us from actually challenging ourselves. So it's just breaking through that barrier to achieve success. So I've got that, and just recently, sitting in the role that I now sit in, and we sort of manage the psychosocial hazards in the workplace, and we case manage those as well. So when things have gone bad, in terms of behaviour, discrimination, role clarity, all those, I think there's 14 or 15 common psychosocial hazards. When they go bad, they reach out to us and go, okay, what can we do about it? We might mediate, work with leaders, work with individuals in addressing those challenges. But one of the things that I did see was that and this is sort of wider than the company I work for or the industry. It's more of a societal thing, is the challenge of really being an inclusive workplace and bringing those diversity groups in. And I just don't think we're doing it correctly. I think we can do a whole lot better. So what I'm sort of focusing on now is driving the change and holding those groups accountable. It's like there's no reason why those diverse groups that we're bringing in need to be a tick and flick exercise just to meet a KPI. It's like, hey, let's get them performing. Let's get them performing as part of any other team, and let's hold them accountable. But we just need to do it. We need to put the systems in place in order to have those challenging conversations. So I don't see it as recruitment. It's more of let's identify some individuals that can meet some certain targets for your group, but let's coach them so they're performing. They're performing at a high level. I'm really sort of focused on that at the moment. And in doing my masters, I was blown away by the lack of representation of people with a disability at either senior leadership roles or on board levels. I think for me to try and find some data on the ASX 300 listed companies, I couldn't get any data of someone with a disability being on a board at a senior leadership role. If someone with a disability is in one of those positions, it's generally in a not-for-profit or in a disability sector organisation.
I've never thought about that, mate. And like you just raised such an important point. There'd be, going back to what you said earlier, like there'd be, without a doubt, unbelievable biases around people with disability reaching to those levels. I mean, they may not be able-bodied, but certainly able-mind. And, the conversation we have today and the insight that you share, we're just people and we've got all different challenges and yours happens to be more physical. But yeah, geez, that's a really interesting. Is that something that in your sort of business or where you're working now, but even moving forward into your business, that you're really going to pick up the mantle and try and sort of push for?
Yeah, 100% I am. And I've never looked at myself as an advocate, but, what's the saying? You can only be what you can see. And for me, when I look at, especially in the organisation I'm at now, you're looking up going, okay, how do I get there? Well, there's no one that actually looks like me and there's no path there for someone like me. I need to create my own path. So, yeah, it's just creating that path and hopefully bringing people along for the journey as well. And that's just not for people with disability. It's for all minority or diverse groups. I think we try to do diversity in silos, and they just fall over. They really do, because they don't have the support necessary. And you did ask me earlier on, post-accident, was there a change in people's sort of behaviour around me? And I even felt that if I go to an event, even now, and I'm introduced as here's Cameron, the Paralympian, these medals, everyone wants to come up and have a chat. You strip that title away and I'm Cameron in a wheelchair, there is a whole level of, assumptions, bias and discrimination put on me. So it's just reframing how we look at these diversity groups.
Yeah, again, I really don't hear a lot of talk when people talk about sort of DEI space and stuff like that, where the diversity side and inclusion is, even the mention of people with disability and stuff, it's all about sort of race and ethnicity and all that sort of stuff. But it does sound like a pretty forgotten group, mate.
It is. And like I said, I had my head down just sort of running my own race, and it wasn't until you sort of sat back and I'm like, well, I'm still having these challenges of equity. Not because people don't want to do it. There's probably a fear on how do we do it, and we don't want to upset anyone. That's why we don't challenge people, from diverse groups the way we need to, because we're so politically correct sometimes that we're too afraid to really challenge someone to be the best that they can be.
Yeah, absolutely. It gets in the way of a lot of good stuff, doesn't it? All that rubbish. But let me just talk about, or ask you about discomfort. It's fair to say, given through this conversation and people learning about your story, you've experienced an element of discomfort. Is that fair to say, mate?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you, either in the future or what you've done in the past in your leadership roles and stuff, how do you help people? How do you encourage people? How do you guide people working through discomfort? Because again, leadership is really about embracing discomfort. Based on your own experience, how do you help people with that?
Yeah, it's just creating that space to sit down and have a conversation and really work out what the driver is or what's making you really uncomfortable. And once we sort of can identify that, then we can have a conversation. Okay, well is it real? What can we do about it? And how do we remove that? Sometimes it's just going to always be there. And you need to learn to live with it and manage it, right? But yeah, first of all, you really need to identify what it is.
I want to talk about you as the family man. Again, as far as my business goes, I generally am attracted, and business owners are attracted to me who are family-orientated business owners trying to get a bit of balance and harmony back in their life. You've got, you share with me, you've got a 12-year-old son and 8-year-old twin girls. What sort of, and you've mentioned this word role model, what sort of role model do you want to be for your own children?
Because you need them here to answer this question. It will be very different to the one that I'll give you. Look, they're three individuals. What I suppose my wife and I, and I'm fortunate that my wife offers plenty of support and guidance for me on how to be a parent or be a better parent.
Mine does the same.
But the one thing that we really want to instill in our kids, or what I want to leave in them, is a strong set of values, and making sure they're guided by those values, and they're the correct values, right? They might be theirs, but yeah, let's make sure that as a human being, you're a decent person first, and you're guide. And don't forget those when you're faced with challenging times, challenging groups, could be a demanding leader. Just hold true to those values.
Yeah, well, look, I've not met your wife, but getting to know you a bit, they've certainly got someone to look up to in yourself, and I'm sure your wife. They don't have to go far to find inspiration in their life, I don't think. Again, reflecting on their dad and where their dads come from, and where you're going, and what you're doing and what you hope to do in the world moving forward. It's just a walk down the hallway, I imagine, for inspiration for them, or it should be.
Well, yeah, I direct them past me and said, "Go to your mum," because
she's even more inspirational.
She's more inspirational. I didn't have a choice in this path, that she's joined me for the journey. And she has to pick up all the pieces when I drop them. And unfortunately, I get the accolades because they go, "Look at the guy in the wheelchair doing these things," whereas she's the one. Yeah.
What sort of, again, you spoke to a little bit, but if you were to sit with your children and just say, look, here's a couple of lessons that I really want to share, that where I'm at in my life, that are going to hold you in good stead, what would those one or two lessons be?
Yeah, look, there's probably, and everyone has their sort of three guiding principles, I suppose. And for me, and when I talk at Perception Performance, it's adaptability, it's resilience, and it's clarity. If you can sort of use those three, there's going to be times in life where things are going to get tough, and you're going to need to show some resilience and dig in deep. But resilience can only take you so far, and I think sometimes we use that word a little too much. And if you're not adaptable, that resilience you're just going to get pounded down, right? And you're not going to move forward. So you need to sort of stick your head up and go, well, yeah, I'm holding it here, and I'm being resilient and holding the weight, but how do I remove the weight to be adaptable? And then it's getting that clarity. Okay, where's the next step forward?
We're going to start to wrap it up, mate, very soon. But I just want to ask you this other question. What's a question you believe every leader should ask themselves to drive their own personal and professional growth?
Probably understanding your story and your journey first, getting a real understanding of who you are, And then when you're trying to get an understanding of your team, it's probably having a think and consideration about, okay, what am I not considering in a specific scenario? And how can I sort of stand back and change that perspective to sort of alter or assist my current understanding of the situation? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, again, how I take that is sort of look at the current reality and then sort of look at future and possibilities. Again, I always look back to continue to be curious and less judgmental. I think there's that curiosity undertone is what you're saying.
Titled curiosity and then the courage to act. Ask those questions.
Yeah.
I get blown away by sometimes when I first went into the organisation, I went in as a 41-year-old graduate because I just found it so hard to get into a meaningful role with, someone with disability. And it just blew me away outside my hiring manager and so forth. No one really came up and asked any really curious questions. For me, I'd go, well, what's the background of that guy? I'd been in the organisation for 5.5 years, and then someone must have, pockets of people knew my background and how I got into mining, but someone must have done a bit of background search, and then I popped up on someone's contact me from the Coalface magazine. It wasn't until that magazine, when I was on the front cover of this magazine, that everyone, wow, we didn't know your story, and it just blew me away that for me as a leader, I want to sort of understand someone. Background, interests, where do you want to go? How are we going to get you there? Am I now a leader that's going to be courageous enough to try and get you there?
Yeah, I think it comes back to nowadays, again, we've got things rammed down our throat that you don't see people as people. You see them as a label. You see a guy in a wheelchair, or you see an Asian walking up the street, or you see a person of colour or a black person, whatever you're supposed to say now. It's like we're not just looking at people as people who have unique backgrounds, unique experiences. It's fair to say that yours is even unique than most people, the challenges you face. But if you've got a deep interest in just people and learning their story, then that's the sort of stuff that comes out, isn't it? And again, I find that one of the most challenging or fundamental basic things that requires some deliberate time investment is that people aren't taking the time, particularly in leadership roles, but just generally to get to learn other people's stories. And again, it comes back to that relational, that trust building, that vulnerability, all of that sort of stuff.
Totally. We get caught up in roles and titles.
Don't we?
And I could feel myself being, that's his role, and this is the way that we get him forward, even though he's come from a very different background or pathway. Yeah, absolutely.
I love your adaptability, resilience, and clarity. I mean, again, in those sort of three areas is absolutely fantastic.
I might get a shirt made up. Do you want to be the first purchase?
You don't have a shirt already? I'm disappointed.
No.
Put it this way, I do at the end of the show, once we finish recording and a bit after, I reflect on the show, I look at the transcript and I start to pick out my top 3 key takeaways.
Yeah.
Look, it's always a challenge. I get to speak with fantastic people like yourself, but I definitely think somewhere along the lines that adaptability, resilience and clarity will come into it. So if they're not on a T-shirt, mate, they'll be somewhere in my 3 key takeaways.
Right.
Maybe our thumbnail on YouTube will be your T-shirt. We can design it for you or something.
But I know. It's like you look right at people doing stuff, especially some of the mindset coaches for some of these athletes, and they've always got three things that they're comfortable with, and they bring them back. I was listening to a mindset coach the other day. Someone said, "Hey, why don't you listen to this guy?" And I found it really interesting. He was really comfortable talking in his space, but when there was a question outside that space, he tried to answer it, and I'm like, "Hey, I know a little bit about that," and no, that's not it. So, but he did a really great job of bringing it back to his 3 key drivers.
Yeah, I think that's where you can also, there's a lot of There's a lot of people in the world today, and again, I don't want to be too critical because everyone's making their way, but you can, just by being interested and asking some deeper questions, you can really start to identify if people actually know their stuff or they just know the limit of their stuff. And, there's not a lot of context outside of that. It's almost like book smart versus, or I've got some stuff, I've developed a model or whatever, but this is the reality and how it works in real life.
Yeah, totally. And, as a society, especially as leaders, we don't want to show that vulnerability that, maybe we don't have all the answers and we may have to look to someone else to fill that gap. The sooner we can do that and have more voices at the table, the right voices as well, the better we'll probably be as a society.
Yeah, spot on. Mate, I'm really excited to see where your journey goes, but I'm also impatient. So I'd love you to give me a bit of a flavour. If we're sitting here in, let's say 3 to 5 years' time and this crystal ball stuff, what do you hope to have achieved in that time? What does it look like in 3 to 5 years' time?
Yeah, for me, really, it's having that impact in driving the change that's needed to get people from diverse backgrounds represented at the right places. I think that's a key focus for me over the next year or two, is building up those networks and relationships, between the organisations and probably the employer groups and sporting organisations, and just go, okay, where do we need to go? How are we going to get diverse groups not just into a role, but into a meaningful role, and then through to a leadership group? We're all aware of all of the literature that's out there in terms of, what diversity brings to a team. We just don't know how to manage that and how to use it or utilise it successfully.
Yeah, spot on, mate. I look forward to, again, as I said, hearing and watching that journey. And look, if there's anything we can do from the cultural leadership perspective or from me personally, then we now have a relationship. You're part of the Culture of Leadership Guest Club, let's say.
Right.
So, look forward to seeing that. And absolutely, you can reach out at any time, mate. So look forward to helping out where I can. Mate, what's the, we always ask this question of our guests to finish off. What's one thing that's helped you build a culture of leadership?
One thing. I think we've talked a lot about relationships, and I think that's it. It's creating those authentic relationships where you're invested in the individual.
Love it, mate. And what I love more is you weren't trying to find something new. You talked about it several times. It's so important. So I'm here. Ditto, mate. Spot on. Mate, I've really enjoyed this conversation. You are definitely an inspiring individual. And like I said, I generally mean it, that it'll be fantastic just to see the journey and the impact that you have, continuing within your own family and the broader business and what you do with your business as well. So really excited for you in the future, and well done on everything you're doing, mate. Fantastic to have people like you that are picking up the mantle in sort of chosen passion and just making a difference. And like you said during the interview, just having a crack, which is so important.
Thanks for having me. It's been really enjoyable, and it's been a long time coming, but thank you.
Thanks for the last dig. It's been absolutely my pleasure, buddy.
Perfect.
These were my 3 key takeaways from my conversation with Cameron. My first key takeaway: confident leaders build trust through relationships. Authentic connections are the cornerstone of effective leadership. Whether in sports or business, taking the time to understand and value your team builds the trust needed to drive performance. My second key takeaway: confident leaders embrace discomfort for growth. Growth often stems from facing challenges head on. By addressing discomfort and creating spaces for open dialogue, leaders foster adaptability and resilience within their teams. And my third key takeaway: confident leaders lead by example. Setting high standards and modelling desired behaviours inspires teams to excel. Great leaders adapt their approach to individual needs while maintaining a unified purpose to achieve collective goals. So in summary, my 3 key takeaways were: confident leaders build trust through relationships. Confident leaders embrace discomfort for growth. And confident leaders lead by example. Let me know your key takeaways on YouTube or at theculturalleadership.com. Thanks for joining me, and remember, the best outcome is on the other side of a genuine conversation.